I want to talk about existential crises. And I think we all go through these in our lifetime. And there are certain times that are well known. I think we have an existential crisis in adolescence. And there are tasks in adolescence that many kids are kind of thwarted in, like rebelling against your parents so you can become an individual. And then we go through the process of early adulthood, which is a lot about gain and amassing our credentials as an adult. We're very goal-directed. It's often around amassing a career, around money, gaining a stable partner, often children, like making our mark in the world. And this uses up a lot of energy and drive right through until we get to about our, used to be early 40s, but we're finding the midlife crisis happens a little bit later and can happen into the 50s, late 40s. It's not an exact time. It's basically when you start to realize that the pointy end of your life is on the horizon. And this can manifest in many ways. Sometimes somebody close to you might get ill, terminally ill, or die suddenly. And you might find that you've achieved some of the things in your life that you wanted, and or you haven't, and the time for achieving those has run out. For example, having children, if you're a female particularly, that is a time-limited choice. Finding a spouse, buying a house. If you're in your early 50s, how many banks are going to give you a 30-year mortgage? I'm not sure, but it's not necessarily always kindled by external events. It's often can arise as a feeling within us of unease, of being unsettled, of discontent is a primary feature of it. And starting to really question. Now, you may or may not be aware that you've become aware that your life is finite. I mean, of course, we're always aware of this. Like, we know we're going to die, but, the amount of energy that we devote towards the amassing of these goals and it kind of tends to run out. And this is a natural thing that would happen, but it's not something that's appreciated or identified by today's capitalist culture that is very driven. So most of what we will read or intake in media is focused towards productive people for capitalism. So they are the ones that are marketed towards, that are buying and accruing and spending and wanting and acquiring all these things. So they want the products, they want the new car, they want the big screen TV, they want to look better, they want the diet products, they want the exercise products. They are good consumers. And so a lot of the media is aimed towards those people, and all the movies are likewise sort of focused around these challenges of finding love or losing love and all of those life things that after a while you sometimes get a little bit bored of, or you realize that you either haven't got them or you have got them, and the things that you have got aren't really as satisfying as you were told they would be or you imagined they would be yourself. But it's more or less that you're finding less and less satisfaction in the things that you used to think would bring you more joy. This can include sex, this can include pursuing partners and mates, or it could be the person that you're with is becoming really stale and boring, or just life is losing its luster. And you realize, as I mentioned, that, if you're in your early 40s or early 50s, that life is, gone from this curve and is now pointing towards this, the pointy end. And what have you done with your life? Now, this is where a lot of people get this calling to really want to have made a mark or make a mark and leave behind some form of legacy. And I think it's a very deep existential need within ourselves to have had meaning or to have been of meaning and of use in some way, and that we somehow leave behind a legacy, because we know that when we die, and we've seen it, we either get cremated or put in the ground, and people remember us for a while, but after a while, that's that. As one of my wise teachers once told me, your life is filled with gaining shit, and then you die and people sell it. Being able to develop within yourself a sense of joy and meaning in your life is tantamount at this time. And the problem is that it cannot actually be hinged or attached to a certain thing, product, identity, relationship, property, car, television, how you look, all of these things. You realize that at a level that your worth and your value and your joy in life can't necessarily be tied to these things. Often people will get a deep dissatisfaction in their career or their path in life at this point. They might have been in a similar role for a while, or they might have jumped through a few roles and realized that in each and every one they feel great for a while, and then they are left with a similar feeling. And that is of boredom, ho-hum, here we go again. Or perhaps they have been quite chewed up by their career and their work role, and they're actually in a state of burnout. And I think a lot of people are facing this, particularly post-COVID. And, we know we had a reason to feel low, down, exhausted, and sort of spent after a couple of years of constant uncertainty and lockdown. But we still don't have a lot of certainty, and I think that's really been slapped in our face. And I'm finding more and more people presenting with this kind of existential crisis in their lives. Now, it's not that they weren't presenting with that before, but I think that the value in life and what we do with it has been suddenly kind of thrust in our face, and coupled with the uncertainty that we can't actually predict that these things may eventuate, because the actuality of COVID and the lockdowns and the control and the sudden deaths and all of the things that were happening and are happening around COVID have kind of made that a question. We don't have ultimate freedom. We can't, if we live in the UK, fly back to Australia here to see relatives every few months if we wanted to, because for a couple of years that couldn't happen. So we really have been thrust into a deeper questioning about our lives and what it all means. And for some people, particularly if they are feeling burnt out, worn down, and I think even having COVID for many people or any kind of spike protein in them has left them feeling less resilient. Like it's kind of worn our systems down a lot quicker, and there's this lingering fatigue and basic question about what does it all mean. And most of us will bring this into ourselves and go, well, what does my life mean? What have I achieved? If I haven't achieved what I needed to by now and in my late 40s, then it's probably, what chance have I got? And particularly if we're getting tireder and we realize that our energy is limited. And if we have achieved things that we wanted to and they haven't been that satisfactory, and they haven't exactly lit us up as we hoped they would in a lasting way, because this is the actuality of life, is that happiness is kind of short-lived. But we need to have a sense of general contentment, because if you're contented, then you're kind of okay. But if you've been chasing happiness and thinking that attaining this thing will give you happiness and you've got it and it hasn't, or you've been chasing this thing thinking it's going to give you happiness and you haven't got it, and so you're feeling probably similar feelings but less efficacy because you didn't get what you thought you should have by now, then you're going to be feeling a little bit deflated, despondent, and possibly in a bit of a depression or quandary about meaning and what your life actually means after all. Now, there isn't a really good answer to this. This is a difficult thing to deal with. I've dealt with it myself, and I find it very difficult to, there are things that I can find solutions for problems or fix-ups that are right there. But when it comes to an existential crisis, that is a crisis around life and the meaning of it, Well, it just means that you've lost the oomph and the passion and the joy de vivre that you may once have had. Now, I really want to sort of pull that aspect out because I think this is really relevant. I mentioned how we are living in a culture where it's all go, 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 and it's very oriented around that consumer-oriented, goal-directed way of being, because that's what marketing wants to do, is sell us stuff, right? And that's what media wants to push. And so we do have this feeling that we should be go, 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 getting something. You know, well, like I said, if we've gone, I haven't got, or if we've got and don't feel great, then we're kind of like, whoa, hold on, I've been ripped off a bit, or this wasn't what I thought, and I feel a bit let down. So let's look at dopamine, because dopamine is actually excreted or more prevalent in our brains and bodies when we are seeking something. And seeking is actually a natural emotion that's drawn from Jack Panskep's 7 basic emotions: care, lust, panic, fear, rage, and play. Seeking is where we are driven and we get joy from working towards something, from gaining something through the pursuit of a mate, through the desire to look better, through our fitness or health goals, through our work goals, through our desire to live in a beautiful house. All of these things are seeking neurochemicals and neurocircuitry, and they're activating dopamine amongst other hormones and neurochemicals. And this is the juice, right? That's the big juicy part, the dopamine. When we get it, the dopamine drops. When we have worn out that excitement and that seeking, the dopamine drops. And so our satisfaction, if it's hinged on that rush, isn't happening. And we have to acclimatize ourselves to that, and it takes time. Now, some people have had a lot of the juice wrung out of them through burnout and being overworked, as I've mentioned. But one thing that I've noticed, or a couple of things that I've noticed in a lot of people's lives. So one, we're probably care deficient, that self-care is really important. And so many people, particularly when they have been in the pursuit of houses, cars, things, television, products, job goals, careers, next step up, fitness goals, and then they get an injury and they're sort of set back a bit. They're very much lacking, paradoxically, in self-care. So we do want care from others, and if we don't have another, then that can be a big problem, because particularly when we get older, we have this voice in our head that scares us and tells us that we're going to die sad and alone. I want to tell you right here and now that is at the end of most people's inner voice. That negative, derogatory inner dialogue that tells you did something wrong, that you're stupid, that you're ugly, that you're unworthy, that nobody wants you. And if you follow it through, somewhere towards the end of your negative tirade on yourself will be that you will die sad and alone. So I really want to get that out there and tell all of you that is a really common thought and very natural fear. It's often highly unlikely. We've got no idea how we're going to die any more than we probably knew how you were going to be born, other than you're going to pop out into the world and you're going to exit from the world. And it's interesting, now that we bring that up, how much emphasis is put on that one day. It's like the wedding, like the birth. So much emphasis is set on that workup to giving birth to the baby, and not a lot on how to bring it up. You can go to all sorts of antenatal classes on breathing and birthing and this and that, but very few people actually go to parenting classes. Now, the reason I'm saying that is that we have so much emphasis on death, like that moment that we blink out of life that into who knows what. I think it's not so bad. I've heard it's quite blissful, but we don't know for sure. But we have so much emphasis on that and not on the quality of our life in between. It's kind of weird, isn't it? So, yes, sometime or other you're going to die. You don't know when it is. You never did. But now, because you're getting older, you think, well, it's coming. And how am I going to live out the rest of my life feeling satisfaction and happiness? A lot of people want. And I don't think wanting happiness is an unreasonable request. But if you haven't been caring for yourself well all this time, you're going to be burnt out and depleted. And your self-care is a very mundane thing, but 100% necessary. Self-care, getting a massage, going for a walk in nature, sitting down reading a book, taking time out for yourself isn't a goal-directed thing. It's not going to burn calories. It's not going to make you necessarily, or might make you look a little less stressed, but sitting down reading a book isn't going to find you a new mate. It's not going to spice up your love life unless the book's about that. But you get my point. So we tend not to invest too much in the basic fundamental caring for ourselves. So that's something that you're going to have to get used to, because if you haven't been doing it, you really need it, and you will need it moving forward. So one of the tasks as you get older is actually going to be able to accept care from others and care for yourself better. The other thing is going to be able to accept less intensity and be able to enjoy more smoothness and contentment. You want to understand that there's a whole world out there telling you you ought to be driven and getting something. Well, what for? Really, what for? So your ability to be satisfied with simplicity and to have drives within yourself that are more oriented towards peace, equanimity, gratitude, pleasure in the small things is going to serve you well. Now, when we come to look at the need for meaning, that's where I want to draw out the words of Viktor Frankl. Now, he wrote the book, The Man's Search for Meaning, and he wrote it post-Auschwitz, of which he was an inmate. So he was a therapist prior to that. And when he was on the inside, he had developed himself a team of people that would stop recently admitted captives, had a tendency to try and suicide by throwing themselves against the electric fences. And so they were basically an early kind of suicide line that would try to stop people from doing this, because I guess there's always a potential that you were going to make it through. That being in the concentration camp wasn't always certain death. And I can't really think of anything bleaker than being in a concentration camp. If we think about our lives, this isn't the point to make you feel bad and tell you you've got first world problems, but they were pretty extreme conditions. But what he was doing was trying to help people find really small things that were very meaningful to them that they could live for. So for some it was as simple as that they wanted to get out and see their child have a child, like see a grandchild, or reunite with their partner, or achieve the things that they were working on before they were captive and imprisoned. They were just very simple goals that had deep intrinsic meaning to the individual that could give them a reason for living. This is the essential part of finding meaning that is from within ourselves and that is relevant to our life. It doesn't have to be big and grandiose and huge and stand out. We don't have to leave this amazing legacy, even though we may want to, and there's nothing wrong with it if you do. But the actions that you do during this life do have a flow-on effect. Now, we all have life, and our life, all of our lives have struggle. All of our lives, I can tell you that for nothing, we all struggle and suffer in some way. Some people suffer physically, some people suffer emotionally, some people suffer psychologically, but at some point in time, there is great suffering. It's inevitable in our life. Suffering is inevitable. But how we relate to this suffering is important. How we relate to ourselves and our own value is important, but that is relevant to how we relate to others. So if you're someone who is down on yourself and full of negative self-talk and feeling ripped off that you didn't get what you wanted in life, or feeling ripped off that you did and you're not happy still, it's really up to you to change that. You know, that's one thing you can do, is become a kinder, loving person who's kind to yourself, because that reflects out. My point is that no matter, even if you're single and have been for ages and probably always will be, it doesn't matter. You are moving out of your life and out of your house to buy food, to get resources, to do your job. And your vibration, your mood, your resonance that you carry into these places does and will affect other people. So if you want to leave a legacy, work on yourself now, never too late. Be kind to yourself now, never too late, to grow yourself into someone who is contented, who has meaning in their life even for the smallest things. And those smallest things might even be other people. And that is your legacy. And that is the best it can possibly get, is that we leave within our wake of existence many kind, thoughtful, neutral even things and interactions and effects that we have had on other people in our environment. I've made a video following on how to increase your baseline level of contentment by expanding your capacity for joy and developing the neurocircuitry for happiness and joy. So you can do this at any stage of your life, but I particularly advise it if you have faced an existential crisis at any stage in your life, that you start to look at developing this neurocircuitry so you can actually change your baseline so that you can experience a general mood of contentment in your life that isn't necessarily dependent on something fantastic happening. So if you're interested to watch this video, please watch on, and I'll have a link in my bio below. Thank you. And so on that note, I will leave you, and I thank you for sharing this time with me. So if you're going through your own existential crisis, follow these simple principles and let me know how you went. If you've enjoyed this, you can leave a legacy of a like or a comment or a subscription. Thank you.